Hey guys, welcome back. So today I wanted to talk to you about my favorite romance audiobook narrators. In my last video, I admitted that it was only recently that I started listening to romance audiobooks just because in the past I've only read them because I thought that they were a little awkward to listen to, and I realized with all of the ones that I've been listening to lately and loving, it really comes down to the narration. Anybody who listens to audiobooks know that the narration can make or break the story. So with all of the ones that I have been loving lately, in addition to the storyline obviously being good, I feel that the narration has played a huge part into my enjoyment of it. And so that said, if you like romance books or are looking for romance books to listen to on audiobook, I wanted to give you my favorite narrators. That way you can maybe try their books out, because I have a feeling that you will really enjoy them simply because the narration that they do is just superb. Let me know in the comments if you listen to audiobooks, and if so, if you have a favorite narrator or narrators that you flock towards. As always, I'd love to hear about them in the comments because I am always looking for audiobook recommendations, especially because I'm fairly new to listening to romance audiobooks, so any recommendations that I can get from you guys will be greatly appreciated. So without further ado, let's jump right in. So for my first recommendation, I want to talk to you guys about Sebastian York. I actually mentioned him in my last video as part of Vi Keelan being one of my auto-buy authors. I have been binge listening to her books recently, and I think a lot of it has to do with Sebastian York being the male narrator. He has a way about him that just exudes sexy. I think that works especially well for romance books, and I would say if you are looking for some excellent romances that are obviously very sexy, very steamy, but also very well done and conveys a lot of emotion, look for books that Sebastian York has narrated. I know he has narrated a lot of Vi Keelan books. He seems to be one of her go-tos. I believe he has also narrated some Penelope Ward books. So really, between him being an excellent narrator and the fact that the authors he chooses to pair up with have written such great books, you really can't go wrong with that combination. Oh man, so this next recommendation that I want to give to you guys, her name is Andi Arndt, and she actually narrated one of my favorite books from 2019 written by Civic, and that is called Heidi's Guide to Four-Letter Words. It was so well done. I believe if you saw my recap video for December, or maybe it was in my top reads of 2019, she did such an excellent job narrating this book. It almost seemed like the book was made for narration because it involves a podcast, and so Heidi, the character, narrates the podcast. She also has a Minnesota accent, which I feel like Andi Arndt did such an excellent job doing. So much emotion is conveyed through her characters, and what I really like about her is that she had her Heidi character, who was this kind of shy woman from Minnesota, and then she has also narrated other books where she comes off as a kind of sassy character, a completely different person depending on the book. I feel like one of the great telltale signs of being a good narrator is to be able to epitomize a character that you're supposed to be while also making your voice recognizable. I know that in the last book of hers that I listened to, I recognized her voice, but again, I didn't necessarily think of that same Minnesota Heidi character that I originally found her from. So that said, she is definitely one of my other top favorite romance book narrators, and if you are looking for a narration that is done by a woman, I can't recommend her enough. Okay, so this next one, I will be honest, I only know her work because of a very specific series, the Night Huntress series, but it is such an excellent series that I had to add her on my list, and that is Tavia Gilbert. She narrates the Night Huntress series by Janine Frost, which, side note, is excellent if you like paranormal romance. Even if you don't like paranormal romance, give it a shot, because other than Twilight, I wasn't familiar at all with paranormal romances until I came across that series, and now it's one of my favorite series that I binge listened to after getting through the first book. So Anyway, Tavia Gilbert is such an excellent narrator. I want to talk a little bit about how she does this series, because I will be honest, it's told from the perspective of the main female cat, and then her love interest is also narrated, though not necessarily through his point of view, but obviously Tavia has to narrate his voice. And so Bones, which is the character, when I first heard how she did his voice, I didn't love it, I will be honest. Because the way that he's described is this very sexy, sleek, British vampire, but the voice that she gave him did not match that image in my head at all. However, after I listened to a few chapters, I realized that she took it beyond just the stereotypical sexy British guy, and she made Bones truly his own character. He's got his own quirks, and so the fact that she decided to narrate his voice in a particular way, I would say actually ends up suiting the character better than what I originally had in mind. And so that kind of creative choice really just sets the bar very high, and why I definitely recommend not only just her as a audiobook narrator, but really the series in general. Again, the Night Huntress series, the first book I believe is called One Foot in the Grave. I'll probably do a separate video about my favorite romance audiobooks anyway, but yeah, she does such a great job, and I believe I have listened to about 6 books in the series. She narrates all of them, which is another thing that I appreciate, is character consistency throughout the books. And so I'm just so impressed with the fact that she was able to build this character and take what I believe was a personal creative choice and project it onto the audience. Because again, I didn't imagine him to have that voice when I first was listening to how he was described, but as soon as I got a few chapters in, I realized I couldn't have it any other way. Next, let's talk about Joe Arden. He has voiced the male role of a lot of books that I have come across recently that I have thoroughly enjoyed. I know one of the authors whose books that he has narrated a lot of is Whitney G. And again, if you guys listened to my last video from last week about my auto-buy romances, Whitney G has made a spot for herself on that list in such a short amount of time. But Joe Arden has done such a great job conveying what I call the sexy man in a suit. It could very well just be because a lot of the stories that I have listened to with him, he has played that character of kind of like the gruff billionaire or the cocky client, which coincidentally, he narrated the male voice in the Whitney G story, Cocky Client. But yeah, he just exudes masculinity, and I really like how he has done it in a way to where he seems very gruff and standoffish, as the characters are supposed to be, but yet when it comes to their kind of heartwarming or save the cat moment, it's still believable because he has kind of made himself into this character to where he's got these redeeming qualities. And yeah, every single time whenever he talks, I can just envision him in my head, and that's really hard to do actually, especially considering the fact that a lot of these romance books have male models on the cover, and so you can't help but want to envision that male model in your head, when a lot of the case that's not how it's supposed to be. But he's a different person in every story, which again is something that I appreciate, especially considering that sometimes the books that he narrates can be very similar. Again, the man in the suit, the rich guy, the billionaire, whatever. But in every single one of his characters, he's bringing something new to the table, which is excellent. Okay, so for my next recommendation, Erin Malone, I actually had to look her name up because I was familiar with her voice and a lot of her work, but I never actually knew exactly who she was until I was doing research for this video. But she has narrated, or rather to me, she is best well known for narrating a lot of the Heartbreaker Bay series by Jill Shalvis. Again, referencing my video from last week, Jill Shalvis is like the top of my list in terms of auto-buy romance authors, and I believe it was probably one of her Heartbreaker Bay series that was my first romance audiobook where I took the plunge, even though I'm familiar with the series. And Erin has done such a great job with her female characters, and that's very hard to do in this case, simply because in the Heartbreaker Bay series, you've got a group of friends who all kind of know each other together, and Erin has voiced not only the males in the story, but she has also voiced multiple females. So imagine the difficulty for having to say, be one person in book 1 and then turn around and not only play the book 2 character, but there's also references to the friend from the first book, and so sometimes they're having conversations with each other. It can get messy really fast, but she does it so effortlessly. And even though, again, her voice can be recognizable, it's not confusing in the least when the two characters overlap, and I'm not envisioning character from book 1 when I'm supposed to be listening to book 2. So I really think that takes a lot of talent, it takes a lot of skill, and especially when it comes to Jill Shalvis books, there's a lot of comedic timing, I feel, and she lands it on the head every single time in terms of getting the one-liners, getting the sass, getting the punches in, not literally obviously, but getting the punches in to the hero whenever she's making jokes. So that is something that is already a skill unto itself, and the fact that her narration is just so upbeat, very in line with Jill Shalvis books in general. So I feel like that's a really good match in general with Jill Shalvis and Erin. And so if you like romance, if you like romantic comedy, I would definitely recommend not only the Erin Malone narrations, but the Jill Shalvis Heartbreaker Bay series as well, just because I feel like you'll really enjoy them. Okay, so continuing with Jill Shalvis books, I actually want to talk about Karen White, who has obviously narrated her books as well. She's got some other works, but again, since I'm such a huge fan of Jill Shalvis, a lot of these characters really come to life and I'm really familiar with them, which is why I feel comfortable recommending them to you guys. But Karen White has done such a great job as well, for the same reasons that Erin Malone, who I previously mentioned, has done. I really like the fact that she is able to hit those comedic elements as well. One of the things that impresses me about Karen's narration is the fact that in some of the Jill Shalvis books, the heroine has a I don't want to say a dark past, because Jill Shalvis books really aren't that dark, but a past that she has to overcome. She has had some trials and tribulations. There are kind of melancholy moments where she's trying to figure herself out, or she's reminiscing about the past, and so naturally that takes a more somber beat. And so in terms of narration, she's able to hit both of those highs and lows, which I think is key, because as you know, you can't just have all highs and have a satisfying happy ever after. You've got to have the heroine figure things out and kind of come into her own. And so she's able to kind of meet those peaks and valleys to have a full-fleshed character development in the end, which naturally makes the ending all the more satisfying. Lastly, we have Zachary Weber. Oh, Zachary. So he has narrated a lot of books by Vi Keelan and Penelope Ward. If you are familiar with the romance genre, you know that Vi Keelan and Penelope Ward have teamed up on a lot of their stories together, and I think that all of those have been just such great stories in general. They make a great duet, which is, that's a side note. That's a different story for a different video. But in terms of the narration, Zachary Weber has done an excellent job portraying all of the men that they have written. I like that in some of their stories, the men are, I don't want to necessarily say mysterious, but sometimes they can be very stoic, and naturally that's hard to convey when you're listening to an audiobook, because if the guy is supposed to be kind of the calm, quiet, collected one, I mean, with narration you have to say words, but yet through his voice and the way that he reads his lines, he's able to convey that. And so you have this fully fleshed out character in your head about how this guy is supposed to be, and it just adds to the story so much, because you find yourself in the shoes of the heroine, wanting to either slap him or shake him or kiss him, again depending on the story, depending on the scene, but either way he's very believable as a hero, which I absolutely love. Okay guys, so there you have it. Those are some of my favorite audiobook narrators for the romance genre. Like I said in the beginning, please let me know if you have your own favorites, even if they're not in the romance genre. I just want to hear about them in general. And I'm really happy that I have come across romance audiobooks that I enjoy. Like I said, I found them awkward in the beginning to listen to. I realized that it was probably probably because I was listening to the wrong story, or maybe the narration wasn't right. But once you kind of find that sweet spot of not only a compelling story, but having the proper narration, I mean, it's amazing from there. And one of the reasons why I like this list, or that I compiled this list, is that all of the narrators that I listed have multiple works under their belt. So that way, if you enjoy a particular story narration combo, chances are you'll have a handful of others to also kind of go down the rabbit hole and enjoy. And to me, that's all the more better, because the more romance, the more better, right? More better? I don't know, I said more better, but more romance, the better. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe if you did. Please leave a comment. I'm always chatting in the comments to see what you guys are reading, to see what you guys are up to. And until next time, bye.